Hi everyone, it's your boy Zach, and I finished Blade Trinity at about 1 in the morning last night. Very, very tired, so I thought I would wait until I was clear of mind to review it. So I've been doing all of the Blade movies over the last 3 days. Blade, Blade 2, Blade Trinity. And a very, very funny thing happens when, you always hear about that, where a new Star Wars movie will come out and someone will say, I binged all the other ones. And you go, why? You've seen them already. I think that just seems annoying. But I got to tell you, these movies that are made, multiple years apart from each other, and you see them multiple years apart from each other, when you see them all three right in a row, it really changes things. I'd always looked at it as I liked Blade 2 the most, Blade Trinity second, and Blade 1 last. And now I literally like them in the order they were made. 1 is the best, 2 is the second best, and 3 is the worst. But for years, I loved Blade Trinity. And I really didn't this one because I'm going to establish the Wesley Snipes Blade ratio and how it's a huge problem. Blade is 4/5 of Blade 1. He is 2/5 of Blade 2, and he is 1/5 of Blade Trinity. Now you might say, I just watched it yesterday and he's in at least half the shots. How can you say that he's only 1/5 of it? How many of the shots is he talking? A ridiculous amount of this movie is just Wesley Snipes standing in a medium shot, completely silent, while Ryan Reynolds or Jessica Biel babble either ad-lib jokes or exposition. In fact, one of the chief things he does in the movie there, Chief, is Ryan Johnson will babble, and then they will cut to Wesley Snipes doing a slow burn. And they do that like 10 times. So the other thing that is just bad about this movie is they broke their own bit. Now somebody was talking about how Blade movies are kind of like the Mission Impossible movies, where they have a different director for each one. That's no longer true because Chris McQuarrie is now prepping his third and fourth of them. And even Chris McQuarrie and Brad Bird, visually their movies didn't look that much different. But the thing about the Blade movies is they had Stephen Norrington, very, very stylish British director, I believe. And then they had Guillermo del Toro, very, very stylish Mexican director. And then they had David Goyer. And it was shot in Vancouver with signs in Esperanto. Like, one of the things that, is so great is I'll talk about an idea on my videos, but I won't quite grasp my own thesis. And then someone in the comments will crystallize it, and someone will say, the setting is a character, which is also kind of like this meme I saw where it said, the flavor of water is its temperature. And then the response is, why does this make so much sense? But yes, the setting is a character. The setting in Blade 1 was real world Los Angeles in 1998 or 97, whenever they shot it. And it's so interesting because I forgot that it was set in absolutely the real world. Now, the second one is set in Prague, but it's like movie video game Prague. You have like these English-speaking homeless people walking into a blood bank with literally like mason jars full of, red water, obviously. But I always don't like when the vampire movie doesn't have convincing-looking blood. The blood in Blade 2 always looked like fruit punch. But then this one is just shot in Vancouver because it's cheap. What is the deal with Vancouver? It's like the city council's like, oh, we got your plans for this new skyscraper. It's a pretty exciting design, but we're going to reject it. We need the building to look like every other building in the city. Just like a floor taller or shorter, maybe a couple meters wider or thinner. But yeah, every building in Vancouver looks exactly the same. And then David Goyer had some stupid good idea fairy idea. Wouldn't it be funny if we didn't name the city, it's just Cityville, just some generic city, but all of the signs were in English and Esperanto. Esperanto is like a made up, a language that I think it's from the 60s. William Shatner, they filmed a movie in Esperanto. The idea was, anytime you pick a language, you favor one country or culture, so let's just make up a fake language and then everyone will use that. And nobody used it. But the other thing that's just driving me nuts is that David Goyer has no style. I mean, I think he directed some Kevin Bacon horror movie before this. And I actually like his writing. His writing has style, but oh my gosh, his directing has no style. It is TV show, and not even like a stylish TV show. It's like one of those CBS cop procedural, cookie cutter shows. It's just awful. So you go from very, very stylish and, real world settings, even if they're a little toned, to Vancouver with Esperanto signs and so many sitcom jokes. Now, the thing is, I actually used to really love it, and I loved it for a couple of reasons. Number two, I was younger, and I liked the ad-libs. I liked all the Ryan Reynolds ad-libs. Okay, earmuffs. When he calls Danica, which is the Parker Posey, one of the lead villains, when he calls her a cock-juggling thunder cunt, that was hilarious, especially at the time when not a lot of movies would have dialogue like that, and it was a Marvel movie. So, and his ad-libs are pretty funny. He's basically auditioning for the Deadpool that won't exist for 10 years or something like that. And also, Ryan Reynolds and Jessica Biel got in insane shape. So I talked about in a video on my other channel the other day that this Frank Miller comic, Electra Lives Again, had been one of the things that had really gotten me into working out when I was younger. And, I still work out intermittently. Right now I'm actually fasting and getting lean. But, oh my gosh, both Ryan Reynolds and Jessica Biel, they look like action figures. Both of them have these huge shoulders. Apparently they were in a push-up contest with each other. And you can even kind of see the order that the movie was filmed in, because Jessica Biel will have some, pretty fit, toned shoulders in some scenes. And others, they are just like two bowling balls. They are massive. But so just as the second one was Blade being teamed up with the Blood Pack, which were vampires who were trained to hunt him, but then they were teaming up to hunt the Reavers, a new strain of vampires. This time he meets up with the Night Stalkers, who are people who hunt vampires. So there's no twist. It's just other people who do what he does, but they're younger, and they're thinking about doing a spin-off. Now, one of the things that I also got pretty angry about is that when you watch these three movies that were filmed over like 6 years, one after the other, you see Wesley Snipes be completely marginalized in his own franchise. I'm a comic book writer, and I've had a rough road with the media. And one of the things I've learned is the media, which is proudly corrupt and biased, they only do two things. They do puff pieces to help you, and they do hit pieces to destroy you. And I think pretty much from during filming to shortly after the time, there were all of these hit pieces on Wesley Snipes. He's so erratic, he's so crazy, he's so violent, he's so threatening. And then everyone was talking trash about him. Ryan Reynolds was, Patton Oswalt was, David Goyer was. It's like, this is a Blade movie. You're literally in Wesley Snipes' house. He built this. Marvel was nothing in the 1990s. They didn't exist in movies. All the movies were DC, right? Were there any Marvel movies in the all of the 1990s and no. It was DC over and over again. Then the DC ones would kind of fade out, and then there would be no superhero movies. And then it would be back to DC. He created Marvel movies. He created the Blade franchise, and you guys are clowning him because he's pissed that you effectively wrote him out of his own franchise. I'm getting so frustrated, I can't even talk. I bet he was the same. Like, how galling is that? And then they reduce all the stylishness. It's effectively, I am not kidding, there is a point in the middle where it effectively turns into an episode of Starsky and Hutch. It's Drake, aka Dracula, and the worst rendition of Dracula ever. So incredibly lazy. This guy he wouldn't even be worthy of a 2-episode arc in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. In fact, he seems to be weaker. He's definitely weaker than Jared Nomak in Blade 2, and he's also weaker. I would say he's weaker than every member of the Blood Pack and Deacon Frost. Like, they keep saying, he's Dracula, he's the original, he has no weaknesses. What the hell? Geez, at one point, Triple H, who is a vampire, is going toe-to-toe with Hannibal King, who is just a human who does a lot of push-ups, and they're almost evenly matched, you know? Triple H has a strength advantage, but that seems to be mainly on his size and not him being a vampire. Oh God, don't even let me get into the vampires who looks like they just did a casting call for background extras and then just cast those people in actual speaking roles. Like, there's nothing gothic or cool about, they're basically suburban vampires, and not even in a cool, funny way, like in just a boring, cheap way. By the way, I actually had to go look up the budget because I was like, there's no way this has a higher budget than the other 2 movies. And apparently it did. The first movie was $45 million, the second movie was $55 million, and the third movie was $65 million. Now there was most likely some, inflation, but I'm thinking the extra money was mainly spent on, I'm guessing the directors got paid more each time. Wesley Snipes probably got paid more, and they definitely spent more money on the CGI. The CGI was terrible in the first one, much better in the second one, and it's legitimately good, but it's legitimately like TV good. Like, it's the type of stuff you would have seen in a sci-fi show at the same time. So Whistler's killed in the laziest, stupidest way ever. Again, they had the whole thing with the familiars, which was done very well in the first 2 movies. And in this one, they're basically just like bad cops out of some dumb TV show. It's like there's an FBI agent, and then he's got his what do they call him? HRT. It's kind of like their SWAT team. But then they just start shooting everyone everywhere. There's this subplot about Blade killing a human, you know, and it's captured on the news. But it makes no sense because the whole thing about the familiars is they would basically be slaves for the vampires with the hope of either being spared by them or being turned into a vampire. This guy sacrifices his whole life. He's like, and he's doing one of those things where he's dying, but he can still give a speech. He's talking in this like thick Canadian accent. He's like, "We got you, Blade, you stupid idiot." And then he's like, "Oh, we died." I go, "What was your incentive for this? What was your incentive to be killed by Blade just to frame him? How did they?" Because he doesn't seem like he was under duress. Like they're like, the vampires are like, "We're gonna kill your whole family unless you do this." Like, he's super proud he's part of this plan. He's like, "Gotcha, sucker. See, it's a pun because you're a half vampire and I called you a sucker. I got jokes." And then he dies. But then they just forget about this. Now Blade does get arrested, and there actually is a fairly cool scene of him being not really rescued. But then they just go hunt Drake, who's just this lame villain. I think the biggest thing is he has shape-changing abilities, but he just does them in the most obvious and boring ways. He kills Whistler, and then everyone knows Whistler's dead, and then he impersonates Whistler. You know, a person that everyone knows is dead, that he never met. Like, you can say, like, "Oh, he's the father of Abigail," Jessica Biel's character, but I don't remember them ever stating that Whistler had met the other. I always got the feel he just like underwrit them and maybe sent them some of their initial cache of weapons, but they have Patton Oswalt. He's the one who makes their weapons for them, so whatever. I did like Triple H a lot and Parker Posey. she's got this ad lib about you're not getting enough fatty acids and you need to try some lake trout. And that's like an in joke I use all the time when someone's sick. And it's like, have you considered lake trout? She's great, and she does a lot of ad-libbing as well. And actually, she does some really good acting. I gotta say, she's like an art movie gal, and seeing her walk in first, she's in some military gear, and she's not convincing. And then later, she's trying to walk in heels, and it looks like the first time she ever walked in heels. But she's fun. Triple H, this is 95% of what I know about Triple H is from this movie. I don't watch professional wrestling. I actually thought he was fun, although they do some really just dumb things. Like at one point, he's chasing a car, and they speed up footage of him running like it's Laurel and Hardy. Something like, what are you doing? That's not funny. That's just dumb. But overall, this is my worst experience. It really bothered me for a lot of it. So there's this bit at the end where, so Whistler was dying of cancer in the first one. He was brought back from being a vampire in the second one. I don't remember them mentioning the cancer, but he does point out that he was fixed, but then they said that the vampires didn't fix his leg. So maybe I got the impression that being a vampire cured his cancer, but the bone was a bone that was probably not aligned correctly. He's like, you could have just broken that bone and reset it, because he doesn't have the healing power anymore. But this one, he's just talking about, he's like, he's old, I'm going to be gone soon. It's like, you look healthy. You're like 72 and you've got great muscle tone. There's no reason to believe you're not going to live for another 20 years. But he's giving a speech to Blade. He's like, I'm sorry I got old on you. I see you alone, surrounded by enemies, and it breaks my heart. Well, that's the movie. It's Wesley Snipes alone. They wrote out Whistler, who I have every inclination that him and Chris Christopherson got along. So they wrote out Whistler. They gave him a bunch of sitcom actors who talk trash about him. And yeah, it's heartbreaking. Like I said, Blade 2 should have been Blade 3, and there should have been a Blade 2 that just, again, concentrated more on Blade and more about his character. And then they just threw him in the trash, and then they're still making fun of him in listicles on the internet like 15 years later. It's like, no, you were in his house. You trashed his house, and then you want to make fun of him for getting angry or just hiding in his den smoking weed because you destroyed. So I looked it up. Like I said, the budget was 45 million, 55 million, 65 million. But then the box office was Blade 2 was the highest and Blade 3 was the lowest. So it did kill the franchise. They had a TV show, which I've heard is fun, terrible. One of the things I remember of it is seeing the advertisements and everything being very, very well lit. It's just like, it didn't seem like a very Blade-ish. And then I looked it up, and there's no place for me to. It's not on Amazon Prime or Netflix. So I was like, I'm probably gonna skip that one. I got a bunch of Star Trek movies to go through. So tell me what you think about this video. Tell me what you think about Blade Trinity. I liked it for 15 years until I watched it, in 3 days of watching all the movies in the franchise, and now I'm just pissed. Although I think there's an anime, House of Chthon or something like that, Blade House of Chthon. I looked for it, I didn't see it. Let me know if that's a real thing. I might pay, if it's Wesley Snipes doing the voice, I'll do it, but I don't think it's Wesley Snipes. I think it's probably just some anime actor. But anyway, thanks for watching, and probably tomorrow I think I'm gonna watch the finale of Arrow season 7, I think. Thanks for watching. Bye.